Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is investigations. It's time for Israel to have an independent, unfettered investigation into what led up to October 7th massacre. In the Oval Office, during a question and answer session with President Trump, Fox News correspondent Peter Doocy asked U.S. President Trump about the status of the investigation into the assassination attempt on his life in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13th, 2024. Trump responded by further expanding the question. The president said, not just about Butler, what about the other guy with all the cell phones at Mar-a-Lago golf course on September 15th, 2024? I'm paraphrasing, obviously. In this inimitable way, Trump went on to explain that this is not on Biden. This is, he said, on me. Obviously, Donald Trump is correct. Until January 20th, Joe Biden was president of the United States, and the information or lack of information on the attempts on Trump's life was Biden's responsibility. And yet, even under his presidency, Trump's presidency, getting answers to these vexing questions about the two assassination attempts on his life still are unanswered. Even Trump, the target and now president, has not found out the answers he is seeking. President Trump, the person ultimately in charge of all the investigations, the boss of the people investigating these assassination attempts, does not have answers. Investigation commissions and committees are notoriously poor at discovering real answers and real reasons. They're notorious for dragging their feet, especially when the people conducting the investigations are not interested in finding answers, and even more so when those same people have a vested interest in ambiguous findings. The President's Commission on the Assassination of President Kennedy, or as it's more commonly known, the Warren Commission, is a perfect example of this. President Kennedy was assassinated on November 22nd, 1963. The Warren Commission was created 1 week later, on November 29th. From the very outset, members of the committee were divided on whether to have a committee investigation and make the report public. Actually, some didn't even want to join the committee, but reluctantly joined. The argument was that releasing the findings to the public could create more controversy than consensus. According to the 888-page report issued on September 24th, 1964, 10 months later, to then President Lyndon B. Johnson, Kennedy was assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald, and Oswald acted alone. 2 days later, Jack Ruby assassinated Oswald, and it was determined that he, too, acted alone. Since then, there have been countless theories and more emerging evidence, both supporting and contradicting the Commission's findings. One thing is for certain, the answers are few and the questions are many. And that's because the investigators were not invested in finding the real answers. Actually, quite the opposite. These many years later, and many presidents later, Donald Trump has now promised to make these findings public, the files of the JFK assassination, to make them public, and the investigation itself. He wants to get to the truth, or at least get closer to the truth. This is not an easy task, but it does explain in large part what's happening right now in Israel. An independent investigation into the reasons for the failures that led to the darkest day in modern Jewish history, October 7, 2023, is essential. It is also strategically essential from the point of view of security. Another October 7th must never happen. It must never be allowed to happen again. The IDF's internal investigation of itself was, to put bluntly, a joke. Statements by now former IDF Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi that, quote, "the responsibility is mine. I was the commander of the army on October 7th, and I have my responsibilities. I see every soldier who made a mistake as also part of my responsibility. Since October 7th, Simchat Torah, I make it a point several times a day to confront failure directly. We have soldiers who fought heroically. We heard the voices on the radio during the inquiries. We have female soldiers who continuously reported with professionalism and calm until the last moment. This is the IDF. Rings hollow. He spoke eloquently, but it rings hollow. He spoke the truth, but it rings hollow. He hardly is assuming responsibility. They were simply empty words, hollow, as evidenced by the staggering numbers, including the IDF report. 5,500 terrorists crossed the border and broke into Israel from Gaza. Terrorists broke through 114 gaps. They used 57 drones. They used 7 boats. They used 6 paragliders. They shot 3,889 rockets and mortars. That is what Hamas did. But the question of how it was allowed to happen remains open and gaping. Israel needs an independent investigation with full cooperation from military and intelligence leadership. The investigation needs full access to all data. Israelis deserve no less. No one, no entity can investigate themselves and be considered credible. State Comptroller and Ombudsman Netanyahu Engelman, his office would be the ideal body to independently investigate the many lapses that led to the horrors perpetrated on October 7th. Engelman has said that the IDF and Shin Bet have obstructed a full investigation on his part into October 7th. Engelman has said that without full cooperation from both security bodies, a comprehensive investigation cannot be conducted. Engelman has urged Attorney General Gali Baharav Miara to force the IDF and security leadership to cooperate. Engelman is correct. The critical point to remember here is that responsibility and complete unfettered investigations are essential, not in order to prosecute criminal actions or inactions. They are necessary because they are the only way to instill public confidence back to the IDF and the security forces. And the findings of the investigation is the only way. Leaders who made mistakes need to be held accountable. Citizens, families, the country, and lovers of Israel need to know that the lives of Israeli citizens have value. That lesson can only be taught after an honest and unfettered investigation. Coming up next, points of view. First up is a column from the Jerusalem Post. It was published on March 9th, 2025. It was authored by Avram Russell Shalev. The column is entitled, Breaking Sumud. Palestinian society must free itself of this fantasy. Opinion, subtitled, For the sake of peace, Israel and the international community must embrace Trump's plan for Gaza. For those who do not know Arabic, sumud means an act of stubbornness. In this case, it means a culture of stubbornness. This is how Shalev begins. U.S. President Donald Trump's plan to allow Gazans to emigrate from the war-torn enclave has provoked fierce rejection from the Palestinians and the Arab countries. Egypt recently proposed its post-war plan, according to which Hamas would cede power to an interim body until a reconstituted Palestinian Authority can take control of Gaza. Despite Arab and international opposition, the United States has reiterated its commitment to President Trump's emigration plan. The Palestinians and the Arab states reject the plan because they understand it means a resounding defeat for Palestinian national movement. Ironically, only such a defeat can pave the way to peace between Israel and its Arab neighbors. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict is driven by Palestinian irredentism, the belief that reclaiming lost land at any cost. The Palestinian national movement is not merely about statehood, but about the total reversal of 1948, as reflected in Hamas's rhetoric and actions. Now Shalev explains that the Palestinian culture is imbued with the premise that Jews and Israel are illegitimate occupiers. This is universal in Palestinian society. And Shalev writes, the popular chant calls for the liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea. There is a universal consensus among Palestinian groups, ranging from the secular to Islamist, that Jewish sovereignty is inherently illegitimate and will ultimately end in Palestinian liberation. The mythology of return and liberation serves as the ideological fuel for the century-long Palestinian war against Zionism and the State of Israel. Shalev now translates the term sumud. Not exactly as I did. He uses a similar English word. Shalev asserts that sumud means steadfastness. He writes, sumud, steadfastness, ideology plays a key role in this struggle. Hamas's 1988 charter declared, "The land of Palestine is an Islamic waqf, consecrated for future Muslim generations until Judgment Day, prohibiting any territorial compromise." 2017 revision maintained that Palestine is the land seized by a racist colonial Zionist project. Mahmoud Darwish, the revered Palestinian poet, captured this sentiment in his poem, "Those Who Pass Between Fleeting Words," a poem calling for Jews to leave our country, a vision of total Palestinian sovereignty from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. In the Palestinian imagination, Jews are settlers who merely pass through occupied Palestine, as opposed to indigenous Palestinians who are deeply rooted in the land, as Darwish so vividly wrote. "Oh, those who pass between fleeting words, carry your names and be gone. So leave our country, our land, our sea, our wheat, our salt, our wounds, everything, and leave the memories of memory, oh, those who pass between fleeting words." That's the poem by Mahmoud Darwish. Now, Shalev tells us something that we have not seen. It's unique. It's very new. He shows us that indeed young people in Gaza want to leave Gaza. If that is true, then there is a chance that Sumud and Hamas will collapse. He writes, "Despite Sumud's propagation by Palestinian nationalists, the facts show that Gazans overwhelmingly yearn to escape Hamas's failed and repressive rule. According to a survey carried out before the outbreak of the war by the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research, 44% of Gazan youth between 18 and 29 were considering emigrating from the Strip. Nearly a third, 31% of the total population considered immigration. While there is no official data, it is estimated that 250,000 people have left Gaza since Hamas took control in 2007. By allowing those to reject Hamas's rule to go, Israel and the international community can expose Sumud as an artificial construct that only serves Palestinian revanchism." Shalev is saying, through the Trump plan, there may be a chance to break the Sumud and bring about real resolution in Gaza. Shalev continues, "Currently, the international community colludes with Hamas to keep Palestinians trapped in Gaza. However, the fact of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians choosing to abandon Gaza would fatally undermine Sumud and Palestinian nationalism. Hamas launched the current war to advance its vision of Palestine liberated from the Jewish presence. Trump's plan would force the Palestinians to pay a steep price for their military adventure. The loss of land and resources that it would entail might free Palestinian society from its deadly fantasy of Israel's destruction. By embracing defeat, Palestinian society might rebuild itself along peaceful lines and accommodate itself to Israel's existence. For the sake of peace, Israel and the international community must embrace Trump's plan for Gaza." This was an excellent column, things that most of you have never even heard of. Palestinians want to leave Gaza. Thank you, Avram Russell Shalev. Next up is a column by Yossi Yehoshua. We've used him quite a few times. And it was published in Ynet on March 5th, 2025. It's entitled, "Shattered Military and Many Challenges Await IDF's New Chief of Staff." Subtitled, analysis, 9 months into his tenure, outgoing military chief Herzi Halevi leaves behind an army grappling with its darkest moment. New IDF chief Eyal Zamir will need to navigate a fractured institution and restore public trust, so viscerally eroded following October 7th. Yehoshua offers an essential and critical observation of the former IDF chief of staff, calling him to task and assessing his tenure and his failures. This is how he begins. The term of outgoing IDF chief of staff Herzl Halevi is not the shortest in IDF history, but it is the most dramatic. It began with great promise, placing on the shoulders of someone who was marked for greatness long before reaching the general staff. Following a series of prestigious roles such as commander of the General Staff Reconnaissance Unit, Sayeret Matkal, commander of the Paratroopers Brigade, head of military intelligence, deputy chief of staff, Yehoshua explains that this was a colossal failure October 7th. He argues that Halevi was in charge and no one is taking responsibility. The country needs to see true accountability, not just words. He writes, however, it ended in the most severe military failure in the history of the country. This is undoubtedly a personal tragedy for a man who dedicated the best years of his life to defending the country he loves and cherishes. But it is an even greater tragedy for the bereaved families and the families of those kidnapped, the soldiers abandoned to their deaths, and the entire nation, which after October 7th will never be the same. Halevi deserves appreciation for his contributions, but nothing will erase the mark of disgrace engraved on his name, a mark that will accompany him for the rest of his life. The IDF Chief of Staff changeover ceremony, far from celebratory, takes place under the shadow of a jarring final note of Halevi's term, the publication of the investigations into the failure of October 7th. Collectively and individually paint an utterly horrifying picture between Nachal Oz and Nir Oz, between Kfar Aza and Netiv HaAsara, between the senior leadership and the field levels. An army emerges that was unrecognizable compared to the rosy image painted by much of the media. Yehoshua makes it very clear that the IDF, under Halevi's leadership, failed to keep the country safe. Yehoshua writes, this is an army that failed to follow basic procedures that could have saved dozens, if not hundreds, of lives. An army without clear and rigorous standards, one where an unsettling uniformity of thought prevailed, an organizational culture that silenced anyone who dared to deviate from the collective consensus. Yehoshua says that the commission will not be enough to return the country's faith in the IDF. He continues, however, such a commission may not suffice. Reading the investigations, one can reasonably question why the military advocate general is not considering launching criminal investigation against some of those involved in the failure. All of them must stand trial before history, each for each of the domain they desecrated. Yehoshua is correct. He thinks that there will be serious calls for resignation. The public as well as the politicians will demand it. In his words, some of the public and certainly parts of the political system would like to see heads rolling in the corridors of IDF headquarters. However, it is hoped and expected that Zamir is wiser than that. Thus, for example, the resignation of Operations Directorate Head Major General Oded Basyuk will take place in a few months to maintain stability and proper handover process. Similarly, Major General Tomer Bar, Commander of the Air Force, will remain in his position for the time being due to regional developments. That, by the way, means Iran. The issue is that it is unclear whether he will have the necessary time to be completely satisfied. The ceasefire is hanging by a thread. The Prime Minister does not seem interested in moving to Phase 2, and discussions about continuing Phase 1 appear stuck. Zamir might spend the first days of his term managing combat operations that the public hears and keeps hearing about will be unlike anything we've seen before. He himself will hope that his term will be slightly less scarring than that of his predecessor. Yehoshua, the author, represents more and more thinkers in Israel today. Israel is waiting to see what will happen. They are also waiting to hear real answers as to how October 7th could have happened at all. Coming up, commentary through cartoons where pictures tell the story. I want to show you 4 cartoons today. The first cartoon up is of Trump showing his mock-up for the Gaza Beach resort. The caption reads, "In exchange, Gazans will be able to live in Greenland." The reason this is so funny is Trump is proposing outlandish ideas, and yet they actually might come to fruition. All of them. Next up is another rip on Trump's idea. He's playing golf in Gaza, and on his golf tee is a dove of peace. He's about to knock it out. Next up is a bomb announcing the coming of Gaza Riviera Casino Spa. Coming soon. All this amidst the destruction in Gaza. Trump is measuring Bibi, Prime Minister of Israel, for a suit vest of the West Bank and Gaza. The cartoonist is saying that Israel is taking over total control of the West Bank and Gaza with the blessing of the United States. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. It appears that Russia is open to discussing a temporary ceasefire in Ukraine, provided it serves as a step towards a final peace agreement. Sources familiar with the matter told Bloomberg. The sources added that Russia agreed to a ceasefire, but there must first be an understanding regarding a framework of principles of a final settlement. I watched as the numbers climbed higher and higher. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reported that the number of Alawite civilians killed by the regime, the new regime, by their forces in Syria has reached at least 745 since clashes broke out in the coastal city of Latakia. The total number of people killed in clashes so far now stands at 1,018, 273 from the new regime, along with supporters of the ousted President Bashar Assad's regime. The Alawites are a small minority in Syria, but the Assads were all Alawites. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, said that Tehran will not negotiate under pressure by a bullying country. A day after U.S. President Donald Trump said he had sent a letter to the country's top authority to negotiate a nuclear deal. In the interview with Fox Business, Trump said, "There are two ways Iran can be handled, militarily, or you can take the deal to prevent Tehran from acquiring nuclear weapons." The White House, responding to Iran's rejection of President Donald Trump's call to negotiate a nuclear agreement, reiterated Trump's assertion that Tehran can be dealt with either militarily or by a deal. "We hope that the Iran regime, puts its people and best interests ahead of terror," White House National Security Council spokesperson Brian Hughes said in a statement. After Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei said, Tehran will not be bullied into negotiations. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu thanked U.S. President Donald Trump for his support. Netanyahu shared the post on X platform that Trump published from his meeting with returned hostages at the White House and wrote, "Thank you, President Trump, for once again boldly supporting Israel in our just war against the monstrous Hamas terrorists." Qatar announced that it is calling for all of Israel's nuclear facilities to be placed under the supervision of the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA. An official statement issued by the Qatari Foreign Ministry stated that the principality is calling for increasing international efforts to place all of Israel's nuclear facilities under the IAEA's safeguards, and for Israel to join the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, the NPT. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, tell me what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Israel just released the video of their Eurovision entry. It is sung by Yuval Raphael. The song is called "A New Day Will Rise." It's about the aftermath of October 7th. How could it be about anything else? October 7th is without a doubt the most influential stimulus for art, music, all forms of art in Israel. On October 7th, Yuval Raphael hid in a bomb shelter under bodies, dead bodies, and played dead for hours. Watch this video. It's in English, French, and Hebrew. It is inspiring.
And even if you say goodbye, you'll never go away. You are the rainbow in my sky, my colors in the gray, my only wish upon a star, sunshine in the day, the only song that my piano ever plays. And even if you say goodbye, you'll always be around to lift me up and take me high, keep my feet close to the ground. Are you proud of me tonight? Dreams are coming true. I choose the light, nothing to lose if I lose you. New day will rise, life will go on. Everyone cries, don't cry alone. Darkness will fade, all the pain will go by, but we will stay, even if you say goodbye. Et même si je dis adieu, tu ne partiras jamais. Mon ciel dans mon ciel bleu, mes couleurs dans le cri. On se souhaite sous un ciel tard, un rayon de ma journée. La seule chanson que mon piano peut jouer. New day will rise, life will go on. Everyone cries, don't cry alone. Darkness will fade, all the pain will go by, but we will stay, even if you say, yeah, day will rise, life will go on. Everyone cries, don't cry alone. Darkness will fade, all the pain will go by, but you will stay, the love of my life. מים רבים לא יכבו את האהבה, ונהרות לא ישטפו. New day will rise, everyone cries, don't cry alone. Darkness will fade, all the pain will go by, but we will stay, even if you say goodbye. A new day will rise. New day will rise.
Wow, that was powerful. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.